Appreciate that, Stephanie. So just again, we had some good conversation in the last room and just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and then go through and introduce our panelists. My name is Kevin Russell. I am a manager for the systems engineering team for the Central Region with Silver Peak. And I've been here for about 3 years, have various experiences with various networking companies like Riverbed and Juniper in the past, and appreciate everyone's time today. So I thought if we could start, Eric, if you could take a moment to introduce yourself first.
Yeah, so my name is Eric Fouarge. I work for a company called SAI Global, and I head up our global engineering practice, specifically in the cloud team. So that's where my focus is.
All right, thank you, Eric. Next, we have Todd.
Hi, everyone. Todd Szewczyk, former VP Director of Emerging Tech, Digital Strategy and Innovation at Burnett. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Charles?
Hi, Charles Wiggins from American Marketing Association, head of technology, and much like all of the other panelists, very interested in being able to talk about strategies and transformation and some of the process that we've gone through, and thinking about the world that we're in now, but also some of the things related to WAN transformation.
All right, thank you, Charles. And then finally, we have Paolo.
My name is Paolo Vallotti. I'm the Global Chief Information Security Officer at Mondelez. Mondelez is a snacking company. We make a lot of snacks you're probably eating, including Oreos, Cadbury, Milka, and so on. Before working at Mondelez, I spent 15 years in the automotive business. So I have global experience in both heavy manufacturing and snacking business.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So just real quick, just to introduce what we'll be talking about today, really focusing on SD-WAN. If we take a look at how the cloud can represent a sea change within the technology, one of the key technologies that's really come out of this is SD-WAN, trying to find better ways to access these applications and incorporate the cloud into your fabric, and really deliver that multiplier effect where we're talking about being able to take the legacy environment that you might expect performance that you have control over, and being able to incorporate that into an open architecture where you have shared broadband, shared resources, and provide the security around all of that. So when you can take all those and combine that, refer to that as a multiplier effect. So hopefully we'll be able to get through some of that today. And get a little information for everyone here. I also want to take a moment and remind everyone too that this is a discussion. So I may be asking some questions to spur some of that discussion, but if there's something that catches your attention or that you want to drill into a little bit more, feel free to speak up and we'll keep the conversation going among all of us. So I thought I'd start off by asking Eric a question here. If you could talk a little bit, I know in our breakout room, we talked a little bit about this, but if you could talk a little bit about how you've shifted from a business first network to a business first network from a technology first network.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the big things that we've been doing at SAI, we're a very distributed company as a whole. The core business strategy for some of our portfolio companies require individuals to travel around. So your typical road warrior auditing type kind of workers. One of the things we saw that was just a big hindrance is just legacy access back to our co-locations and accessing infrastructure that's built out in the cloud and stuff like that is just a pain. And then it just got got compounded when we all had to start working from home pretty much overnight. So I come from working within Google's PSO program. So we adopted a little bit of the practices that Google does internally and started rolling out kind of a Beyond Corp model for leveraging more of an identity access proxy type model to access applications and services that are secured inside our data center as well as in our cloud footprints, and that allowed us to rapidly adopt this kind of work from home motto very easily. We were able to be pretty successful with that and keep the security team off our backs at the same time, which is always fun.
Yeah, I totally understand. So I mean, could you talk maybe a little bit about some of the strategies that you implemented through that to make the process, go smoothly for you?
Yeah, so we use Okta for a single sign-on solution that kind of federates a number of our domains as well as allows some of our vendors to authenticate into our platforms easily. Since we're distributed across clouds and on-prem data centers, we couldn't really take the approach of like cloud IAP from GCP. We needed something kind of vendor neutral. So we rolled out a open source solution called, I can never say this, Pomerium, Pomerium. It's effectively the same identity access proxy solution that Cloud IAP does in GCP. So we rolled that out, and it's been pretty stable for us for now.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Based on part of your comments there with regards to security and keeping security off your back, I know, Paolo, with your background in security, I thought maybe I could ask you the next question. So what are maybe you could talk about some of those new security challenges corresponding to new security approaches associated with supporting digital transformation with a modern WAN architecture?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was just checking if I was on mute or not. Yeah, so there are a lot of Mondelez has been a very traditional company, and we rely on our data center for a long time, trying to run as much as possible off-the-shelf solution like SAP, but now there is a push for modern and new applications that are available on the cloud. So we are transitioning to not only infrastructure as a service in Azure or AWS, but also trying to move more toward software as a service solution, which make our IT organization leaner and much more dynamic than what we were before. Because if you think about how long it would take to upgrade or make changes in an SAP environment, it's usually months, if not years. So that's the first piece. And then from a digital transformation perspective, we are really betting on optimizing our workforce through RPA, so robotic process automation. And then, of course, being a consumer-focused organization selling snacks to millions of people around the world, the next challenge for us would be really e-commerce and building new channels to sell our products outside the usual distributor approach we use so far. So there are a lot of opportunities in the digital transformation space. And definitely having a more dynamic, different approach from an enterprise architecture perspective is one of the pivotal components. We are very focused on a heavy traditional waterfall methodology when it comes to project management, which is, I would say, in our way to innovate much faster. But definitely, we just got a new CIO as of a couple of weeks ago, virtually, because we couldn't meet with him. But the point, I think, the reason why they brought him in is to get a different point of view on how digital transformation should really impact our ability to execute the business in the span.
All right, thank you, Paolo. I think tying into that, Todd, you had mentioned that when we were discussing, you talking about your WAN transformation and how you support and accelerate that. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience?
Sure. So, working at an ad agency, we work with clients and help them through their transformations. So, working with a Fortune 500 brand, recently we helped them sort of navigate moving from their own owned platforms to the Adobe Experience Cloud. It's a process that really took, it's still underway. We started in 2016. And over the course of 2 years, really sort of moved all of their brand websites, 14 of them, over to the Experience Cloud. Just a like-for-like switch. No enhancements and not really leveraging the tools, but just standing everything up. And from that point forward, starting to really optimize, the websites and using some of the tools to actually be able to make changes to the content almost in real time, which for us was a switch moving from campaigns that would take 10 to 12 months to really get from idea to actually live on the on a site to like doing it all in a couple of weeks. So I think what Paolo is saying is like moving these consumer websites, moving in sort of real time and being able to change the content really, really quickly and respond to what's happening is really, really important.
Right, thank you. So I guess maybe can you maybe go into a little bit more detail on what level of automation that you're providing in that to help facilitate that?
So again, like we're not providing the tech, but we're helping them, go through the transformation itself. And from an automation standpoint, part of what the client was really doing is they had data living in a bunch of different places. So one of the central pieces of the transformation was to move everything into a data lake, which again, as everybody who's here probably knows, that takes a long time to do. And so once that was set up, all of the sites could then access the consumer information based on what brand site they were looking at. And so the automation was happening there. A lot of this is in Azure. So that's sort of how we help them.
All right, well, thank you. I think, Charles, on that note, if we could talk a little bit about how you partner with your organizational leadership to accelerate those business objectives. If you take what Todd was talking about, and you're talking about the partnerships with other companies and the technologies, if you could talk a little bit how you handle that within your organization.
Yeah, so we were pretty much in the situation that had been explained by everybody on the panel. We had disparate data and platforms and systems that plagued the organization for years. We were very, very siloed. We had multiple data centers where we had technology that was in those data centers that ran specific functions, and there wasn't really any bridges or communication channels between them from an integration standpoint. And so in 2016, we actually started a project to modernize and transform that organization with the intent of being able to get to working in more of an agile state as opposed to waterfall. So that was kind of the big start for us. We completed that, and at least first phase of that in February of last year. And that was literally a lift and shift of our CRM, CMS, and ERP onto cloud-based technologies that were all highly integrated and scalable, so that we can, as I stated, move to more of an agile state of working and innovating the organization at the speed and the pace of the market. The AMA puts on anywhere from 6 to 10 major conferences spread throughout the US, Canada, and Mexico every single year. And we also have various different training sessions that we put on, which are 1 or 2 day verticals in different marketing topics. And those can run 20 to 25 a year in-person events, as well as we have a virtual arm. And so, for us being able to have solutions that were accessible, scalable, and secure for a mobile workforce was very, very important. And, that was one of the things in, getting the business to understand what was going to allow the AMA to grow was that we had to change our technology. We had to change our way of working. We had to change our organizational processes, but we also had to build out the underlying infrastructure. So, some of, Todd's point about just getting the technology, getting the foundation in place, that was one of the things that we were really focused on and delivering last year. And ever since then, it's been just, pretty much running on the fly. As much as the organization has wanted to innovate product services, experience design, we've been able to put effort into bringing those things into production and bringing those things into the market at a pretty impressive speed and scale.
So how do you
if I can jump in.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
How did that, can you talk to us about the impact on the organization, just on the people side of things? How was that adopted across the organization? Because you're looking at multiple applications, migration, moving people's cheese. How did that work for you?
It was a monumental effort. So, you think about the change that can happen and the fatigue that can come with that change, especially when you're dealing with multiple major system platforms like a CRM, a CMS, and the ERP, coupled with the fact that organizationally we have been on all those platforms for 20 years, right? So it was a lot of, from an organizational, from a staff standpoint and their workflows, there was a lot of muscle memory that was built up into what they were doing day to day. They were just pointing and clicking. It wasn't like, oh, okay, I need to follow this guide or anything like that. So one of the things that we did early on in the process, after we chose our route, understood what platforms we were going to, and rolled out our roadmap as to what milestones we were going to be hitting and when we were going to be hitting them. We created a change management group, and a change management group was just 100% tasked with understanding the internal and the external change. So thinking about like the PES factors, political, economic, social, technology. So thinking about all of those different factors that can plague internal stakeholders, internal audience, external audience, and in thinking about that, we put together robust training plans. We put together communication schedules where, it was a thing of where people heard like, oh, okay, we're moving to Salesforce. And then maybe for 6 months, they didn't hear anything about it. So it was constantly keeping them in a loop. But, one of the things that's really, really key to that is internally and externally, you want to create early champions, right? So that was really, really big to us, was getting somebody from every single business unit of our internal organization, creating a champion, having that champion the process in their departments, so that helps us to be able to increase our leverage, increase our exposure, increase our scope, because they're able to filter and feed information to people that they're in the trenches with day to day. And then externally, all of those stakeholders, you obviously want to keep the kitchen as small as possible when you have these projects, because too many cooks in the kitchen, projects can spiral out of control. Everybody's got their opinions of how stuff should look, how things should be designed, how workflows, what systems should be accessed a certain type of way, what data flows which ways. So there was a fine balance of trying to keep them involved as much as possible, but let them know like, hey, this is something for the benefit of the entire organization, internally and externally, not just for like this one department or this one division.
Yeah, thanks, Charles, and thank you for the question, Chris. Eric, I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about, I apologize, I lost my spot here. Some of the pros and cons versus looking at how you would manage something for yourself versus outsourcing.
The good old religion question. I'm a huge proponent of insourcing and skilling up my team and owning what we're supporting. But in the world of, I need to get stuff done quick and I need to layer on additional priorities with crazy timelines, that's where outsourcing really kind of comes in and saves the day, as long as you manage it well. The issues that I've personally ran into working with outsourced teams is you either fully adopt and manage the work that they're doing and kind of box it in to true deliverables, and you actually get what you want out of them. If you don't do that, then you're never happy with the work that comes out of it or the solution. So it just really kind of comes to a fine line of how well your processes and your project management is in the organization is really kind of where it, for me personally, kind of determines which way I'm going to go.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I thought maybe this would be since this is always seems to be a debate that goes back and forth amongst everybody, I thought I'd open it up to the room to see if anyone else has any comments that they'd like to add regarding, managing yourself or outsourcing. Is there anyone that's on the other side of that where you have seen value in having it outsourced?
Hi, it's Alfredo. I think back to what Eric mentioned, right? It's a fine line, and why I always get concerned when people say give it to a managed services because they don't know what they're doing, which is true, but it has to be managed, right? It's a managed service. We've really adopted a plan, build, run type model, right? Where my team really consists more of what I call architects, right? And we do the planning, and then we work with the service providers to help us do the build, which could potentially lead for them doing the running and the operation side of it. Not guarantee that they do, but that model has been more effective, right? Where we're not just having someone build something for us and then just kind of handing it over and we're just kind of there, right? So that model has worked for us. It hasn't been easy, but since we're a managed service provider for our organization and not a corporate IT, it really separates the line of keeping the lights on activities to helping do more value added initiatives to the organization, right? So now we can really cut here's what we do for support, here's what we do for development. So it has helped us. It wasn't easy to implement though. It was a huge change management throughout the organization.
Really have to have a good partner too, because some of these professional service organizations, it's a body shop, and you don't get the same skill set. So, if you have a good partner, you can bring them in, train your people, and then, you've got the skill set on staff and just use them for project-based work.
And it's iterative, right? I mean, you're going to continue to build on that and so on and so forth. When I came into Omron, they were primarily, their ERP was outsourced, and that was my first task. Is it was a terrible relationship. No SLAs in place. It was not good, and 50% of the issues were Omron's, right? It was kind of handed over and said, you're the expert, you do it as you can, and as best as you can without really putting any guidelines in place. So went to a new provider, we set those in there. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, but it works very well for us, right? But it took us some time. It took us 2 or 3 years to build that good relationship.
So it sounds like I'm guessing most of the room is on the side with Alfredo then, and that's the way you've gone where you're managing that yourselves then. So this is where you're probably looking at a lot of the visibility and the reporting and the automation that this tool is providing you are really important then. Sound about right to everyone?
I mean, I think there's a time and place for it. That's kind of where I sit with it. I think, there's a lot of factors that go into, you have to understand your internal capabilities and capacities, right? I mean, if you don't have a team that's large enough or structured enough from a knowledge and a talent standpoint to take over something, then outsourcing might be your best bet. But then, to Eric's point, there is definitely value and benefit to the organization, especially to the team, to scale up internally, because that makes people more versatile, that makes people feel more involved in the process, and from a technical perspective, and somebody who's been in the technology world for a while, there's nothing better than the feeling of knowing that somebody is investing in you and investing in what seems like you and your future in that organization. So I think that that's definitely. But if you are a smaller tech shop and you don't want to be a software development firm, you don't want to operate that model, then outsourcing has its benefit for maybe like major lifts, major builds and taking on the brunt of it. But on the flip side of it, any type of TCO, any type of models that you think about, or if you want to get any type of ROI out of platforms, there has to be some level of ownership you feel like you can achieve of your platform and being able to manage and run it yourself.
And one of the things that we've done for our customers is create a managed services model where you can dial up and dial down the amount of effort you get from us. So with an Oracle Cloud platform, one of the challenges is, they're upgrading that platform every quarter. So there's a lot of testing, particularly if you have payroll involved, that has to happen. And you can leverage a managed services organization to do some of that testing because they see the platform across multiple customers. They could test scenarios that you might never even consider as part of your test plan. So I think there's a balance. Charles, you're exactly right. It depends on what your organic organizational capabilities are and how big you want that tech team to be. It's just, you got to find the right mix for your organization.
Understood. Well, thank you. Maybe we'll shift back to a little bit more about the technology aspect of it. Paolo, could you talk a little bit about how you keep pace with data-heavy technologies like IoT, AI, blockchain, things like that?
Yeah. So of course we make snacks, but I would say we are bottom line a manufacturing company. So we have 115 plants around the world. So we make products like other companies make cars or other type of equipment. So the connectivity now that is required to run a factory in the proper way, it's the requirement for connectivity is much higher than in the past. So people realize, even in the consumer packaged goods, which is where we fit, that the data you can collect from the field, from the machines in the production line that you use to make your products are extremely important, not only from a quality perspective, but also to drive efficiency and improving the utilization of the production line. So all this data, including security data related to the PLC or the control system in the plants, are all collected centrally. And we are moving, even from a security perspective, to really centralizing as much as possible all the signal we can collect from endpoint servers, industrial controls, and stuff like that, because it's much easier to run event correlation in the cloud versus having something that is distributed. So we do have collection point in our plants where it's required. So if I need a low-level interface with our network, I need to have a span port to collect the traffic that goes on the network. Then I'll deploy as much as possible virtual appliances in those locations. I may have some other aggregation point before I get to the cloud, but ultimately all this data go to the cloud. And we went through I would say major transformation effort on our WAN infrastructure, moving away from MPLS or traditional type of link to a more centralized environment where we have some link out to the internet, but the majority of the traffic is routed depending on policies to different location through our SD-WAN technology. So that's the way we approach it. So we can do some traffic shaping, prioritize the traffic depending on communication. Of course, Skype for business or Teams in the future will be, actually is our main communication system, and with a distributed workforce, it becomes extremely important to have that. On top of that, to Kevin's point, IoT is a priority as well. So you need to pick and choose what goes where and making sure that the performance are there.
So just maybe a follow-up to that, what are the challenges? Because I know a lot of times, especially in manufacturing, you have to bring business partners, you have to give them access to various things, especially if there's, I don't know, some control mechanisms, machinery that they're still interacting with. What's your challenges with tying them into that as well?
So that's definitely a major challenge, not only for Mondelez, but when I was in Fiat Chrysler automobiles, we had similar challenges because one way the manufacturing engineering people reduce their cost is to have a remote assistance. So these people need to remote into your network and connect to the HMI, the user machine interface on the production line, and do some testing, troubleshooting, whatever they have to do. Firmware update as another example. So physical presence in the plant is definitely one option, but it's more expensive. And it takes time for people to get there. So the way we did it here, we have a centralized solution based on Honeywell that provide them kind of a remote desktop or remote access through a secure infrastructure. So they have to authenticate, get in, and then they can operate on the remote devices.
Also, another security hole if they're putting devices out there and not patching them and keeping all the systems updated or antivirus malware.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. So I know we're coming up close to the point where they're going to put us back into our breakout rooms. I thought maybe we could take the last couple minutes, and Todd, I would throw this question over to you. I know, if I recall correctly, you said you were in the process of evaluating an SD-WAN solution and taking all these things into consideration that we talked about. Maybe talk about what are the things you're looking for and how you would tie that into your environment. What would be important for you out of that?
Well, so a lot of what I did at Burnett was around this whole idea of how do you make seamless consumer experiences, because a lot of the advertising might be happening above the line, but as advertising shifts to experience and helping consumers complete and complete the goals that they're looking to do, whether that's signing up for something or getting something delivered, speed and the ability for networks to be set up behind all of that is incredibly important. So, more of what we were doing was consumer facing, but, consumers, as we all are, if something takes longer than 2 or 3 seconds, you're going to abandon it. So whether that's something that's on site or whether that's a mobile application, really looking to have the fastest possible exchange of data to happen so that a consumer can complete an action. That's really sort of what our focus has always been. So I know that didn't quite answer your question, but I think it maybe gives a little bit of a different angle on, where the pressure of speed is going to come from, and it's going to come from the consumer, and that's going to happen even more now, given the current state that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good point. Is there anyone else? I guess I can open this up to the room then to tag on that. If there's anyone who's dealing with that remote challenge, and that's, if you have things like, we're talking about Teams and those types of applications, or those things that you're struggling with this, with the situation that we're in right now with so much of a mobile workforce. And I can open up to anyone who might have some comments around that.
Now, Clover has primarily been a Skype. We converted about 3 or 4 phone systems, and we've had about 4,000 people on there. So luckily we were in a good position of basically being remote, having Skype on all the systems and enabling the users to be out of the office way before this happened.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
I can provide my perspective. So yeah, we have a mixed situation, of course, because the plant need to be run by people, right? But most of the office people are actually on work from home policy until we change our direction. So we have a team that is dedicated and monitoring the situation on daily basis. They connect with top management as well to make a decision on how to proceed. But yeah, with the remote workforce, a lot of our systems and the collaboration tools are based on cloud. So the biggest challenge we had was to tell people not to use VPN to leverage on Skype for business or their OneDrive for business and other collaboration system like SharePoint or Outlook, because they thought, oh, we're not on the office anymore, but we need to access all these systems. So we work with the end user compute team and send communication out for over 2 weeks, explaining them, okay, look, if you want to use SAP, then use VPN or Citrix. Otherwise, you don't need to do that. And eventually, we saw that the curve of utilization of the VPN went a little bit down. And in the meanwhile, we worked at the very beginning of the crisis to upgrade our infrastructure, VPN and Citrix, to fit the need for remote workers.
All right, thank you. I know we're coming up to the point where we're getting ready to go back into our breakout session. So I just thought I'd open it up to the room to see if there were any questions or anything that you wanted to hear or dig into a little bit more if before we break it back into our the breakout rooms. I think then I just want to take I think, Stephanie, we're probably ready to go back to the rooms, and I just wanted to take a moment and thank our panelists today for joining, and I appreciate everyone's participation with the questions. And again, if you have some additional detail, we're going to break out into some smaller breakout rooms where we can talk in a little bit more detail and get some additional answers for you. And again, thank you for your time and participation today.